Hey guys, welcome back to another video. Today's topic is going to be on why dominant monies emerge over time. Money is both simple and complex at the same time. It performs a lot of various functions we rely on it every day, but if you ask somebody to give you a definition of what it actually is, you'll get a completely different answer depending on who you ask. You ask economists, you'll get one answer. People that work at banks or higher up finance guys, they'll give you another answer. Ask celebrities like Elon Musk or Jeff Bezos a third answer, and ask someone on the street a completely different answer. So what I want to do today is first define what money is, then look at the history to show through this new understanding or this new framework for looking at money why the dominant monies emerged over time, how we developed into the current monetary system, and then with this new simplified framework for understanding money, it's easier to see what likely comes next. So to start off, I want to define money as a good. To me, money is a good that performs a very specific function, but it goes through the same market process that other goods and services go through. So if you think about what you consume on a daily basis, right, what companies you use to buy the products you need for your daily living, what really drives those companies to succeed over time is maximizing the value they deliver to the end consumer while minimizing the cost. So high quality for low cost. And money is no different. It's been confusing because the states monopolize control over it, and people think it's always going to be the government that defines what money is. But if we look through the history, I'll show you that that's not necessarily going to be the case. So first, let's define it. To me, money is the lowest cost settlement mechanism a society can access. So money is not credit, it's final settlement. Money is what extinguishes debt. Um, Often people define money as a store of value, medium of exchange, and unit of account. Those to me are consequences or emergent properties, not the root of what money actually is. Over time, like we just said, that money goes through the same market weeding out process that other goods and services go through, and whether consciously or not, eventually the dominant monies that emerge are the ones that minimize friction or cost in trade. Now, in order to better understand this, let's go through the objective monetary properties, but reframe them through the lens of cost. So quick breakdown, most people are familiar with these objective monetary characteristics, but we'll go through real quick each one. So durability is looking at how quickly money erodes over time. So in the physical world, monies that corroded or eroded fast imposed an individual cost to the bearer of that money, right? If you held the money for 10 years and it degraded over time, it was going to be worth less when you went to trade it for something else. Second quality is portability. This is just the cost of transport. A money that has very high cost of transport isn't that effective as a medium of exchange and therefore lowers its long-term store of value properties. Divisibility is the cost of transactional flexibility. If you have a money that's not very divisible and it can't be used for small transactions, that limits the goods that can be demanded in the money and the total addressable market of the money as a whole. Scarcity is really the costliness of reproduction. So if a money like seashells, for example, are very easy to find. They're very available. They don't cost much to go produce. If those are the dominant monies, it's not going to last very long because people are just going to pick up those seashells for free and go buy things with them. That does not work. That imposes a high cost to people holding onto that money, which is why they got out competed. Verifiability, that's the cost of authentication. In the physical world, this was pretty hard to do. But you want a money that minimizes the cost of authenticating it. You want people who are accepting it trade to be able to identify and authenticate that this is real money and not something that's been counterfeited out of nothing. So the main point I want to make here is that the dominant monies that emerge are the monies that reduce the total net cost of all these characteristics to the lowest. That is to me why gold has been dominant, right? People think that gold was always this dominant money, but it went through the same market process that any other good or service goes through, and it emerged over time, and now the narrative is that it's the best money or the best physical money, but it's only after it succeeded that people recognize this. So let's go through the history just really quickly, from primitive memory types of money to commodity money. Now I didn't mention barter, but we'll go through this really quickly. So early money was shared memory, bones, beads, and tablets. These are more of credit systems that local societies used to facilitate trade, but that wasn't transportable across borders, right? Those same types of money would not be recognizable in another part of the world, right? Those were more local community type monies. So then eventually we saw physical money emerge. First it was shells and then metals. These didn't require familiarity or trust, just recognition. And like we just talked about, gold dominated because it minimized the total cost of all of those objective monetary characteristics. But it still did have significant costs relative to this new form of money, which was paper money that governments created. So these physical limitations of gold created frictions, especially as the economy started to scale into what we know now as the modern economy. So this global, more hyper-connected economy required faster settlement, and gold was expensive to transport. So the state introduced paper money as a more efficient medium, and then eventually we migrated to centralized credit layers to scale these digital credit systems in which we all trust to facilitate trade. The way governments introduced fiat money at first was saying it would be backed by gold, but as we've talked about in previous videos, it was never backed by gold. This was just a way to implement a monopoly over money creation and give it the government or central bank exclusive authority over creation of money. And the market accepted it because it had no alternative solution. And it didn't realize the hidden costs that would emerge, which are inflation or dilution and Caesar risk or censorship. So I just briefly touched on this before, but the next slide here is why gold failed. Gold was market selected. It went through this competitive process over a very long time, but as the economy became more global, demanding speed, it really just couldn't compete. And so once gold was centralized in banks, it was easy to seize, inflate, and monopolize by these political institutions. Physical money couldn't resist political capture. So the key insight I wanted to make here is that fiat money won because it scaled more efficiently in a digital economy, and really there was no effective alternative that can compete. Right? As the economy moved more to a digital economy where we transacted with people all over the world, there's no way to physically settle with physical money if you're transacting across large distances. It's just too expensive. And we didn't have natively digital money at the time, and so it was very easy for governments to monopolize control over the monetary system. And that's how we move into Bitcoin. And this is where the last dominant monetary system can be threatened. So Bitcoin can compete where gold failed because it can be a lower cost natively digital settlement mechanism than fiat money. So Bitcoin inherits the core traits that make gold dominant, but sort of re-implements them in digital form. And that's why you see this comparison to digital gold. So it scores really well on durability because it's just a digital money. It doesn't degrade physically. So the durability is 100%. You can't do better than that. It's portable, right? So all you need are your private keys. You can transact nearly instantly. All you have to do is wait for one or two confirmations, and you can settle trade with someone across the world in 10, 20 minutes. It's divisible, so you can divide it all the way up to 1/1 millionth or 100 millionth to the Satoshi, which makes it divisible. But the cost of using it rises with demand, which confuses some people. But it's verifiable, so the cost of verification is extremely low. You can run your own node with a basic computer and instantly verify the quantity and quality of your money for practically nothing. And then the costliness of reproduction is high, so it does have this 21 million supply limit, which I would watch previous videos because that's overhyped by the speculative community. And then it's recognizable, so it's growing through monetization, and now because of awareness, people suddenly believe that Bitcoin is the best money in the world. So unlike gold or fiat, Bitcoin is trustless, permissionless, and can resist state capture. So where gold failed, Bitcoin can potentially succeed if individuals are willing to take on the personal cost of resistance. Okay, guys, so in terms of Bitcoin security, it's often thought to be the system itself, right, the technology alone that secures Bitcoin. Right, people think Bitcoin is censorship resistant by default, that it's inflation resistant by default, but it's actually not. Bitcoin is just a technology that allows people to potentially resist censorship and inflation, but it requires users actually run Bitcoin and take on the personal risk of whatever the governments impose for people that are caught using Bitcoin, right? So potential jail time or fines. That's what individuals have to be willing to take on in order to actually, defend Bitcoin censorship-resistant qualities and inflation-resistant qualities. So it's just like any other layer of security, like a lock, right? A lock itself isn't going to protect your house, right? Somebody can break that lock. You need somebody to monitor the system and take action if someone is attempting to thwart that security. Another important point on this is that decentralized distributes that risk. So individuals who are using Bitcoin, if they are greater in number, it distributes that risk among all the users running Bitcoin. This is different to centralized systems. Centralized systems concentrate risk in one point of failure, and decentralized systems share it. And so the main point here that I want to make, and it's based on a common misperception, is that Bitcoin's security really depends on people who run nodes, who mine blocks, and refuse coercion. So when we inevitably get to the point, if Bitcoin demand is high enough that governments start to outlaw it, being permissionless money requires individuals to use it even if it's not allowed. So if people are willing to use it, that increases Bitcoin security, and if they're not, then it's not going to be a very effective tool. And I know this was a quicker video, but I wanted to move through it pretty fast. Let's conclude today's topic. Basically, we looked through the history and redefined money and came to the conclusion that markets converge on the lowest cost money over all these objective monetary characteristics that we looked at over time. That's how any dominant good or service emerges. Fiat money persists not necessarily because it's superior, but it originally was a lower cost alternative for an economy that needed to settle trade more quickly and at greater scale. And so we kind of traded convenience for long-term inflation and censorship risk. Bitcoin changes the equation here and has the potential to cause a revolution in the monetary system because now we have a lower cost, natively digital form of money that can compete where physical monies failed to resist state capture. But that battle isn't technical, right? It's not the technology alone that's going to save you. It's dependent upon individuals willing to share the risk in this decentralized model and use Bitcoin even if it's not permitted. And that's why privacy is so important and will become more important into the future, and one thing that Bitcoin is lacking right now. But the real question is, to me, after going through all of these videos, is what happens when the cost of staying in the system becomes higher than the cost of exiting it. And we talked about in a prior video about why the cost of state money is going to be much higher into the future. We went through the history of how monetary systems emerge and why they fail. And oftentimes, because we artificially manipulate rates downward, we pull forward future demand. And the cost of the state money system is sort of hidden in financial asset inflation. But as the economy stagnates and that inflation moves out of financial assets into real goods and services, suddenly people start to reject the money. And so we're going to face this point in time where inflation and regular stuff is very high, the governments start printing money at much larger scale, and individuals now have an option to exit. So the cost at the margin should shift quite a bit once we enter that scenario. And I think it's likely that people will at least try to reject state money and use something else, and we'll get into this war over money that I talked about in another video. So that's really when things will change, when we'll move out of the speculative casino market. But because we understand why dominant monies emerge over time, it's really the incentives at the margins that can and likely do bring about revolution in the monetary system. So I hope that makes sense. I know I didn't do the greatest job of explaining that, but I appreciate your attention. Thanks for watching if you made it through. You can follow me at WLitecoin on X and at the Litecoin Forecast on YouTube. And I do talk about this in greater depth and more clarity in my book, Why Everyone's Wrong About Bitcoin. So make sure you pick up a copy of that when that's released in the next few months. Thanks again, and see you in the next video.